So, hello everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar, which will give you an overview of environmental risk management in the supply chain with ISO 14001. My name is Pereira da Cruz, and I'm an author at 𝗍𝗿𝗂𝗏. I do quite a lot of ISO 14001 consulting and training. Still, I also audit as the lead auditor. So today I will share my thoughts about risk management, supply chain, and ISO 14001. My presentation will last about 40 minutes, followed by a 20-minute Q&A session. If you have a question, you don't need to wait for the Q&A session. Feel free to ask it during my presentation by clicking the Q&A icon and submitting your question if you work with Zoom, or making comments if you are watching through LinkedIn or YouTube. Naturally, during the Q&A session, I'll also address your remaining inquiries. If you click on the chat icon, you can download the PDF handout of this presentation and access links to articles that will be published during it. Okay. Later, we will send you an email with a link to the recording of this webinar and the list of articles mentioned. Okay. Now let's see. Okay, so what is this webinar all about? Well, it explains how organizations can determine, assess, and reduce environmental risks in their supply chain by applying the principles of ISO 14001. This webinar is for professionals managing supply chains, sustainability officers, and anyone involved in implementing or auditing ISO 14001. Why is this topic relevant? Well, because up to 90% of companies' environmental footprint, may come from outside its own operation. So, meaning that supply chain risk is business risk, and now more than ever. So, let's see our agenda for today. We'll start by exploring why environmental risk management matters, not just from a compliance perspective, but also as a driver of resilience, reputation, and long-term value. Next, we'll look at ISO 14001 as a practical and internationally recognized framework for managing environmental risks. It helps us move from isolated actions to a structured system. Then we'll dive into the supply chain, where many of the most critical risks and opportunities reside. Okay, so we'll discuss how to assess environmental risks in supplier relationships and how to translate those assessments into action. That leads us into setting expectations. Okay. So we'll talk about how to set and verify environmental requirements for suppliers and what good monitoring and verification practices look like. We'll then explore the evolution from control to collaboration, how leading organizations are shifting from top-down compliance approaches to building partnerships for continual improvement. And finally, we'll wrap up by looking at the main challenges companies face in managing environmental risks across complex supply chains, according to the emails that I received from you before this webinar. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, so when we adopt a life cycle perspective, we unlock new opportunities at every stage. In design, okay, choose materials with lower impact, reduce complexity, and extend product life. Okay, in procurement, selecting suppliers with cleaner processes or better environmental certifications. In operations, both internal and external. In distribution, okay, so optimizing packaging, transport routes, for example. And customer use, so making products more energy or water efficient, for example. And then comes disposal, okay, so promoting take-back schemes or design for recyclability. Now, when we speak, this is life cycle. When we speak about the supply chain, okay, we think about this part of the life cycle, okay, this part of the life cycle, okay. So the focus. Now we have a question here. Jose asked, can an environmental aspect be an environmental risk? Okay, an environmental aspect, uh, an environmental aspect can generate an environmental risk, but they are not the same. Okay, so not all environmental aspects generate environmental risks, or at least relevant environmental risks. Okay, an aspect is related to risk if there is uncertainty. Okay, so uncertainty is the key word. Okay, uncertainty about the likelihood or the control or the consequences. So for example, during manufacturing, we have machines, and those machines may generate noise. Okay, so the aspect will be noise levels below regulatory limits. So noise levels, the noise goes outside the organization, so but it's below regulatory limits. And so what the risk is minimum. Okay, but another aspect can be due to a malfunction, due to a breakdown, noise levels become above regulatory limits. Now we have a risk. The risk is neighborhood complaints and regulatory fines. Okay, so that's the difference. Richard asks, all about contractors. Yeah, this webinar is all about contractors. Okay, it's all about determining risks related with contractors, determining risks, evaluating those risks, and controlling the activities, products or services related with those risks. Okay. Now, so life cycle and supply chain. Now let's see the differences. Okay. So what is different? Supply supply chain focuses mainly on upstream impacts, while life cycle covers cradle to grave, so from raw material to disposal. Okay, supply chain addresses supplier environmental performance, while life cycle considers all stages. Okay, design, production, use, end of life. Supply chain is often linked to procurement and sourcing policies, while life cycle is often linked to product or service design and innovation. Although, of course, suppliers can work with us in innovation. Um, Supply chain may involve audits, codes of conduct, or screening, while life cycle may involve design changes, material substitution, packaging innovation. Okay. Now, supply chain puts the emphasis on external influence and collaboration, while life cycle puts the emphasis on internal responsibility over product service footprint. Okay. Now, I leave you the link to two articles. One is called Driving Your Supply Chain to ISO 14001 Compliance. Okay. And the other one is 4 Steps in Identification and Evaluation of Environmental Aspects. Okay. Now, we have here a question from Raul. How should I include my suppliers in my life cycle, and how should it differ from my environmental aspects assessment? Well, so include your suppliers by determining which life cycle stage they influence, and by setting controls or requirements. So remember clause 8.1. So it's like that. So it's I will show you during the Q&A, I will show an example of recording supply chain risks. Okay, so and when I present an example of the kind of forms that we have in the toolkit, I will also show you the place where you can there's a column for the activity, and you can put there the activity like packaging the product, something that we do internally, but we can also, the activity can be upstream our organization. So when working with suppliers or in the supplier's premises, or can be downstream. So like, for example, what will the customer do with our product after at the end of the life cycle, at the end of when. So will it dispose the products? Will you send to recyclability? What? Okay, so we speak about that then. Okay, now so difference between supply chain and a life cycle. Now let's begin here. The environmental supply chain challenge. Why this is important? Why this supply chain is why this is important? So let's begin by taking a step back, okay, and looking at the bigger picture. So why is environmental risk management in the supply chain such a critical issue today? So we are facing growing global pressures on multiple fronts, and the supply chain sits right in the middle of them. So we will have, or you have, or your organization have, so environmental pressures. So governments, investors, customers, and even insurers are demanding accountability for environmental impacts, not just within our own operations, but across the entire value chain. This concerns with the performance, the environmental performance of our suppliers is no longer a nice to manage if we can. It's becoming more and more part of the core business issues. Another pressure is legal and regulatory. So environmental regulations are expanding in scope and reach. We now see laws that explicitly hold companies responsible for what their suppliers and even their suppliers are doing. Okay, and also reputational pressures. Okay, so let's not forget the power of public perception. A single negative story can go viral overnight. Now, so let me give you some real examples. So, in the fashion industry, major brands have come under fire after it was revealed that their suppliers were polluting rivers with untreated dye waste. Even if the brand didn't do it directly, the public and regulators still held them responsible. In electronics, okay, so the sourcing of rare earth minerals and improper e-waste disposal has created significant environmental and ethical backlash. Or in agri-food, okay, so unsustainable deforestation like linked to palm oil or soy supply chains has triggered global campaigns and regulatory responses. So the risks are real, okay, and they're growing. So why now? Why it matters now? Hmm? Because supply chains are more and more complex. Okay, so because supply chains are now where most of the environmental impact and most of the risk actually lies for some companies or for a growing number of companies. Studies, okay, show that for many industries, up to 90% of the environmental footprint is outside their direct operations. So if we want to manage our environmental performance, to reduce risk exposure and deliver on sustainability goals, we have to look beyond our walls. Okay, so we need visibility, we need influence, and we need action throughout the supply chain. And this is exactly where ISO 14001 can help by giving us a structured, okay, risk-based approach to handle this challenge strategically. Okay. Now, I leave here a link for another article, ISO 14001, Risks and Opportunities versus Environmental Aspects. Okay. Now, let's focus, okay, now in ISO 14001. Now that we understand the challenge, why these risks and environmental risks in the supply chain are relevant, let's look at how ISO 14001 help us respond to it, not just at the level of compliance, but through a structured and proactive system. So at its core, ISO 14001 is not just about being green, okay? It's about building a management system, a structured, repeatable way to manage environmental responsibilities with strategic intent. So it's based on, the plan, do, check, and act, so the PDCA cycle, and integrates environmental thinking into the art of the organization's decision-making processes, okay? So it encourages organizations to understand their context, determine risks and opportunities, and define environmental objectives that align with their operational and strategic priorities. So what makes ISO 14001 particularly relevant today is its risk-based thinking, okay? The standard doesn't tell you what your risks are, okay? It requires you to determine them yourself, assess their significance, and take action accordingly. So environmental management becomes part of how the business operates. Determine processes and risks that impact the environment, okay? Then evaluate associated risks and opportunities, set up controls and performance monitoring, set performance and performance controls and performance monitoring, and continually improve based on results. And importantly, this isn't limited to just operations within our own facilities, okay? And this is a cycle. And so tomorrow I will start with a company a series of meetings that will be tomorrow and then next week just about this, because we realized that they had they determined the risk some years ago and didn't made any new update on the risks. Okay, so there may be new risks, or the evaluation, the classification of the risks. Some relevant risks now, perhaps they are not so relevant, and vice versa. Okay, so we need to keep this as a cycle update. So emphasis on the value chain, so upstream. ISO 14001 explicitly calls for a life cycle perspective in our value chain, meaning we must consider environmental impacts before materials arrive at our door. When we think about this value chain, we think about this upstream part. So we're encouraged to engage with suppliers and partners, not just to comply with legal requirements, but to influence and improve environmental performance across the value chain. So ISO 14001 is not just an internal checklist, okay? It's a framework for environmental governance, risk management, and I would say my main message is about collaboration, value chain collaboration. So it gives organizations the tools to think strategically about how they impact and are impacted by the environment, both directly and indirectly. In short, ISO 14001 helps us move from reactive compliance to proactive leadership. Okay. Now I leave here links for 3 articles: risks and opportunities in ISO 14001, what they are and why they are important, the role of risk management in the ISO 14001 standard, and plan, do, check, act in the ISO 14001 standard. Okay. Now let's see that first part about the determine and the evaluation. So so far we've discussed the importance of managing environmental risks and applying a life cycle perspective. But how do we actually assess environmental risks in the supply chain? What are we looking for, and how do we prioritize where to act? So we need to determine environmental risks. So the first step is to determine the types of environmental risks that may arise from your suppliers and outsourced processes. So think of, I don't know, for example, suppliers may be operating in ecologically sensitive regions, or simply suppliers with poor transparency or a history of incidents, or suppliers that work with hazardous materials. Okay, some of these risks are visible on the surface. Others require investigation, like supplier engagement or data from third-party platforms. And to make this manageable, we need to define clear criteria for prioritizing which suppliers or processes pose higher environmental risks. Okay, some useful criteria include things like the location. So something like, is a supplier in a high risk country or region, or type of raw materials. So are the inputs resource intensive, rare, or associated with ecosystem destruction, or production processes? So does the supply use chemicals, generate emissions, or environmental history? Has the supply been involved in any incidents, fines, or negative audits? Does the supplier have an ISO 14001 certification? Are they open to sharing data and collaborating on improvements? So, okay. Now, to structure the assessment, organizations can often use a few simple but effective tools. Okay, let's see some tools. Risk matrices. Okay, um, plot the probability of an environmental issue against the severity of its impact. This helps visualize which suppliers or materials deserve most attention. I don't present here examples of these matrices because you can see in the webinar specific of the risk about risk. So criticality analysis, so combine environmental risk with business dependency. For example, a high risk supplier who is also the only source of a key material deserves special focus, for example, and supplier segmentation. So group supplies into categories, so high, medium, low risk, based on objective scoring. This makes it easier to apply different levels of control, of monitoring, or support. Okay. Now, you will find all the aspects and risk-related documents in our ISO 14001 Premium Toolkit. Let me show you how it looks like. Let me see. So, okay, here, okay, you have the list of all the documents that we have in the toolkit. So we have procedures, we have forms, lists, we have guidelines here, for example. So, okay. So you have here the clauses. These ones here are those that are mandatory according to the standard. Yeah. So let's focus our attention in this procedure for identification and evaluation of environmental aspects and risks. The process aspect chart, and this procedure for operational control of significant environmental aspects. Let's see. Let me go here. So this example, procedure for identification and evaluation of environmental aspects and risks. So this is a Word file. This is completely customized. There is some link for some articles which can help for if you have any doubt. So this is customized. So about the aspects first, and then about the risks. So, for example, we have here risks and opportunities. Okay, the steps that we need to do. Okay, yeah, and I told you about that before. Oh, let's see this example here for. Oh, let me make this bigger. Okay, but for example, so this in here, that's this column here, activity. Okay, for this column here, activity, we can include here activities that we do inside our within our walls. Okay, inside our facilities, and we can put also here activities that are done upstream or downstream. Okay, and then we have here the complete okay, the life cycle, but okay, today is more the value chain. We can put here where it happens. So the activities, okay, inputs, outputs, aspects, impacts, if there is any kind of regulation, legislation, okay, and then the evaluation. Okay, so, and all right, let me see here. So when we determine the risks, we evaluate the risks, and then we need to mitigate, control, minimize those risks. Okay, and so in this procedure for operational control of significant environmental aspects, we see an approach how we can do that. For example, when working with suppliers. Okay, when working with suppliers. Okay, also we have here the design for that. Okay, so Word files, Word file in this case. The other one, this one here is an Excel file. So yeah, we completely customize. You can add columns if you want, if you need. Now, let me see. Let's go back to, all right, here. Okay. Now, let's see here. Okay. So let me give you a quick example. Okay. A company making cosmetics. It's funny because I was speaking with someone before this webinar about cosmetics. Yeah. Well, a company making cosmetics identifies that one supplier uses natural ingredients sourced from a biodiversity hotspot. So, what are the risks? Okay. And the supplier is, okay, they realize that the supplier is in a political unstable region. Okay. Has no environmental certification and provides 40% of a key ingredient. So this is flagged as a high risk and high criticality. So the company decides to engage directly with a supplier, request improved environmental controls, and begin developing a secondary source to reduce dependency. So you see how this works. Okay. So we check the context. Okay. We check the context to get the, clause 4.1 together with, in this case, the interested party, an important supplier. Then we determine the risks, we evaluate the risks, and then, okay, we need to act. Okay, that's what we have here. Now, Lizette asked, does ISO 14001 suggest any approach or standard commodity classification to better identify and manage potential environmental risks in products? No, Lizette. ISO 14001 does not suggest or mention any specific approach any specific classification or commodity classification. Okay, the standard leaves it to the organization to choose appropriate methods for determining environmental aspects and risks, as long as they are consistent with the requirements in clauses 6.1.2, so about the environmental aspects, and 6.1.1 about the risks and opportunities. However, using classification systems can support a more systematic and consistent determination of risks, especially in complex supply chains. When I'm auditing organizations, sometimes I think that most of the organizations have complex evaluation systems. I think it's not needed, but okay. It's their system, but we don't need that. We need something that help us make a kind of a segmentation. What needs action? What needs our focus? What needs attention? Because resources are scarce. Now, so we determine the relevant, the significant risks in the supply chain. Now, what we need to do is set environmental requirements for suppliers. Okay. So what do we expect from our suppliers in environmental terms? So this will depend on your industry, risk profile, and sustainability goals. But common expectations include compliance with environmental legislation in their own country, safe handling and disposal of waste, reduction of emissions, energy use or water consumption, use of certified raw materials. Okay, for example, if you use timber from forests. Okay, adoption of an environmental management system like ISO 14001. So these expectations should be proportionate to the supplier's risk level and influence, and ideally aligned with your internal environmental goals. Once defined, these expectations need to be formalized. Okay, there are several tools you can use. So something like supplier codes of conduct, a standalone document outlining your values and expectations. So these often include environmental, social, and ethical clauses. Can be contractual clauses. So embed specific environmental obligations directly into contracts. For example, supplier shall maintain ISO 14001 certification, or supplier shall not source from protected areas, or so ESG, so environmental sustainability governance screening in tenders, so requires environmental disclosures or third-party certification as part of the selection process. So these tools don't guarantee performance, okay, but they create a clear baseline, yeah, provide the legal leverage and help set the tone for collaboration. I leave here the link for an article called Understanding Relationship Between Environmental Aspects and Operational Procedures, okay? Now, we have a question here from Louise. Louise asked, I just wonder which type of controls exist for suppliers, okay, regarding the environmental management system. Okay, so ISO 14001 allows several types of controls, okay, over suppliers. So we can think about selection and evaluation criteria. So we can use environmental performance or certification as a condition, okay, in the selection. We can think about contractual requirements, okay, clauses that require compliance with environmental rules or standards. Direct controls like audits, inspections, or approval of supplier processes. Communication and awareness, so informing suppliers of relevant environmental requirements. Monitoring and influence, so tracking supplier performance and encouraging improvement. Okay, so that here is where we can work with clause 8.1, the operational control. Okay, yeah, it's here now. So we set the expectations. We set these conditions, and okay, we need to audit or verify performance. So setting the requirements is only the first step. We also need to verify whether suppliers are actually meeting them. So options include self-assessment questionnaires. Okay, so this is efficient for low-risk suppliers, for example, low-risk suppliers, but limited in reliability. You know, yeah. I'm I'm thinking about some situations where the organization made an inquiry and a survey, and suppliers put the first answer, all the first option. Yeah, so limited in reliability. So we can do desk reviews, so analyzing permits, certificates, and emissions data. This can be done. Or on-site audits, so applicable for high-risk suppliers, can be conducted internally or via third parties. So because this is more expensive, so it's for high-risk suppliers. Performance scorecards, okay, aggregate data from various sources into a visual risk or compliance profile. The key is to apply these verification methods based on supplier risk and criticality rather than a one-size-fits-all approach. Now, let's look at a few examples of indicators you might require or monitor. So, for example, like ISO certification, mandatory for top-tier suppliers by 2026. Okay, something that you can communicate and check. Or waste recycling rate. Okay, you want your suppliers, or at least suppliers that work with non-hazardous waste, that at the minimum 70% recycling of non-hazardous waste. Or so greenhouse gases emissions disclosure, scope 1, scope 2, so annual reporting required from 2025. So for example, in Europe, this works for some situations. Okay, so scope 2 covers, so yeah, cost emissions from the supplier. Water use, for example, per unit of production, so reduction targets agreed and monitored. Okay, these indicators not only drive improvement but also help standardize expectations across suppliers, making management more transparent and aligned with your own sustainability commitments. Okay, so in summary, what we want is to set and verify environmental requirements, and this all about this setting and verifying is all about clarity. Okay, we want clarity, so make expectations specific and measurable. is something that unfortunately I see in the relationship in many organizations between suppliers and customers is lack of clarity, consistency, apply them fairly and proportionately, collaboration. Okay, this is the thing that I think is the most important to when we invest in this supply chain, environmental risks determination, evaluation, and improvement. Is that the focus should be on collaboration. Okay, support suppliers in meeting their needs, especially where there are capability gaps. Okay, this approach strengthens your supply chain, reduces your environmental risks, and build the foundation for shared sustainability progress. I read an article, a technical article this week, um, principally about. I remember reading some. One of the topics was um, when there is a good relationship with between customer and suppliers. So in this business to business, normally suppliers, when there is innovation, suppliers share innovation not with the bigger customers first, but with those customers where the relationship is stronger. Okay, so this may become related to the competitive advantage, okay, of your organization can work for that. Now, I leave you a link for two articles: how to define the EMS, the environmental management system, key performance indicators according to ISO 14001, and the other one is risk-based auditing, okay, a smarter way to ensure management system effectiveness. Okay, all right, so now, so far we've focused on determining risks and setting the requirements and how to monitor. But managing environmental issues in the supply chain isn't just about avoiding problems. It's also about unlocking new opportunities. Okay, so this brings us to a more proactive and forward-looking topic: sustainable innovation with suppliers. So we want to go from control to collaboration. So traditionally, supply chain management has been focused on control, including the audits, the compliance, the penalties. But innovation doesn't happen in that environment. It occurs when companies work with suppliers as partners rather than just vendors. Okay, so sustainable innovation means co-developing new solutions that reduce environmental impact, create value for both sides, and support broader business and sustainability goals. So this mindset shift, okay, from checklist enforcer to innovation catalyst, is a hallmark of mature supply chain environmental management. Okay, so unfortunately, normally we don't start there, but we want to get there. Now, examples of sustainable innovation with suppliers. So let's look at a few real world examples. So a clothing brand works with a textile supplier to develop new fabrics made from recycled ocean plastic, reducing waste and creating a marketable sustainability story. Or eco design, so an electronics manufacturer partners with a supplier to redesign packaging, reducing material use by 30% and cutting logistic emissions through lighter shipping. So many years ago, I would say about 20 years ago, a company asked me to work with them in how to use I would say, it was the beginning of what would be a European standard for reducing the impact of some of products, how to apply this. And I remember just making an exercise. So a company manufacturing products for bicycles with plastics, and it was just with a morning during one morning we found some examples of how to reduce the amount of raw materials without without making any maintaining the robustness of the performance of the product. It's wow, just one morning, because someone finally looked at this. And okay, we have also this. So waste valorization. Okay, a food company collaborates with ingredient suppliers to convert by-products from production into new products, such as animal feed or bio-based packaging. I would say last year, and my first working day in January 2024 was working for 2 days, a training session for a company working in a economic sector that has more than, I don't know, more than 3, 4, 5,000 years. So the wine producing, and it's incredible when you see what happens. So with the in the wine sector, so the grapes are going to be used for making the wine, but the seeds are used to make them oil, okay, to make some oils. Even the the mm, don't know. I don't remember now the name, but even the part that when you buy some grapes in the supermarket, you eat all the grapes, and what you have something there. Okay, even that is used to manufacture other kinds of products. At the end, everything is used. Okay, so I see, wow, this can be used for every industry. Well, waste valorization. So a food company collaborates with ingredient suppliers to convert bioproducts from production into new products, such as animal feed or bio-based packaging. Um, Process optimization. So a chemical buyer collaborates with the supplier to optimize water usage and wastewater treatment, resulting in both cost savings and a lower environmental footprint. So these examples demonstrate that environmental and economic performance can be mutually beneficial, especially when innovation is a shared objective. Okay, so sustainable supply chains aren't just cleaner; they're also more innovative, more resilient, and more competitive. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, then comes monitoring. Once expectations are set and collaboration begins, the question becomes, how do we know if it's working? So this is where monitoring and continual improvement come into play. Core principles of ISO 14001 and essential to any sustainable supply chain strategy. So why monitoring matters? Well, okay, to track supplier performance over time, to detect deviations and emerging risks, to measure the impact of environmental initiatives, to provide feedback and guide improvements, and to support transparency and reporting obligations. So without monitoring, even well-written environmental policies or contracts lose their power, okay? So some key tools for monitoring. You can adapt your monitoring strategy based on supplier risk, capacity, and your organization's maturity. So some commonly used tools are environmental scorecards. I will show you an example right away. Audits and assessments like on-site audits are ideal for high-risk or critical suppliers. Desk-based, already mentioned about that. Digital platforms. So many companies are now leveraging digital supply chain tools to track sustainability data, monitor supplier certifications, flag non-conformities in real time, enable supplier engagement through dashboard or mobile apps. Now, I leave you a link for an article called How Does Product Life Cycle Influence Environmental Aspects, according to ISO 14001:2015. And let's see. So here's a sample supplier environmental scorecard visual, okay? So illustrating how to track key performance indicators such as ISO certification, greenhouse gas emissions reporting, recycling rate, water use efficiency, and audit results across different suppliers. So you have here um, this dashboard, let us say so. You can compare 4 suppliers and how they perform for each topic. Okay, so this is an example of this kind of environmental scorecard, supplier environmental scorecard. Okay, let's go to the main challenges. Okay, I'm just going to initiate. Okay, so based on the emails I received before this webinar, these are the main challenges. So suppliers and contractors in environmental management systems. So how do we extend environmental control and influence beyond our walls? Environmental aspects versus risks. Are we correctly determining what really matters and what could go wrong? And risk management and ISO standards. Okay, so are we using risk thinking effectively or just ticking boxes? Okay, I have some slides in for the Q&A session that will help answer some of these topics also. Now, let's go for the conclusion. So to conclude, managing environmental risks in the supply chain is not just a compliance task, it's a strategic opportunity. And to help you all that, you can use �11𝗿𝗂𝗏's ISO 14001 Premium Documentation Toolkit. So here's the link with more details, okay? And I'll also send you the meeting link now to schedule a call with our toolkit expert. He'll explain how the toolkit works and show you any document you'd like to see, okay? So here's the toolkit expert meeting link, okay? Now, okay, let's go to the Q&A. Before we begin with the Q&A, just to mention that you can also ask me anything about ISO 14001 directly. Just send me an email, okay? And I'll answer as quickly as I can. If you have to leave before this Q&A session is over, please fill in the short survey that will open right after you leave the webinar. Okay, let's see. So I leave here 4 links, my final 4 links for courses that you can attend these courses for free. You just need to pay if you want to get a certificate, okay? So it is our ISO 14008 foundation course, so a video course, a lead implementer, ISO 14001 lead implementer course, ISO 14001 internal auditor course, and lead auditor course, okay? So let's see questions. Let's see if I have any questions here from LinkedIn and or YouTube. No. Let's see. Mark asked, please define or describe how risk management differs from ISO 9001, 14001, and 45001. So, Mark, risk management is a discipline, okay, focused on determining, analyzing, and controlling all types of risks, okay? So, strategic, financial, operational, across an organization. So the methodology is the same. The scope is different. So 9001 risks are about quality objectives and customer satisfaction. 14001 is about environmental risks and opportunities related to aspects and compliance. 45001, occupational health and safety risks to prevent work-related injury and ill health. Yeah. Now let me see here. Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. Sarina, I will answer your question. Let me just answer it to Sarah. Okay. Sarah asked, what is the best way to capture and record all environmental aspects and impacts? Okay. So the best way, so how to capture and record all environmental aspects and impacts. Okay, so the best way is to create and maintain a documented register of environmental aspects and impacts. And you can also include the risks, covering both internal operations and relevant supply chain stages. So use life cycle thinking to identify aspects the organization controls or can influence, okay, or can influence. Assess significance based on defined criteria, okay? And then you can do something like this. So, for example, so what is the best way to capture and record all environmental aspects and impacts? I wouldn't say that this is the best way. This is a possibility, okay? Case 1. So you have here, there a table with the columns life cycle or the activity, let us say so, the environmental aspect, impact, and environmental risk. So case 1, a supplier clears forested land without permits or in protected areas. Okay, so life cycle, this is during the sourcing of raw materials. the aspect is procurement of raw materials from non-compliant or very unverified sources, environmental impact, biodiversity loss, ecosystem destruction, greenhouse gas emissions. The risk is legal liability, reputational damage, supply disruption, loss of certification. Now, the opposite, or a supplier follows national regulations to clear land for agriculture. So in this case, we have the same life cycle, sourcing of raw materials, the environmental aspect, procurements with known environmental footprint, environmental impact, land use change, carbon emissions, there's always an impact. The environmental risk is not so big as the first one, but it's not negligible. So reputational concerns from non-governmental organizations or customers, stakeholder pressure, potential future non-compliance if laws become more tightened. And another example is this one. So failure to meet new air emission limits. So life cycle is during the production, internal operations, environmental aspect, combustion processes, impact, air pollution, contribution to smog and acid rain, harm to human health and ecosystems, environmental risks, legal penalties, forced shutdowns, loss of operating license, reputational damage. You see, the impact, the difference between impact and risk, okay? But now, see, the same company, but operates within legal air limits, okay? Life cycle, environmental aspect, combustion processes, environmental impact, emissions to air, same thing. I can even put there air pollution, okay, but within acceptable and permitted levels. Environmental risk, low or negligible. And by the way, beware of breakdowns or malfunctions. So several types of breakdowns can cause an organization to exceed legal emission limits, even if normally compliant, if they're normally complying. So malfunctioning, this case would be with filters or failure to follow operating procedure during startup or shutdown, or fuel quality deviations. Remember, ISO 14001 clause 6.1.2 mentions when determining environmental aspects, the organization should take into account abnormal conditions and reasonably foreseeable emergency situations. So consider this. These are the ones that are more related when for with risks. Okay. Now, okay, question from Sareen. How do we assess a company who depends on a single supplier? Yeah, this kind of question was on my mind since the beginning. Okay, because all this when we set expectations, when we depends also on the depends also on our level. That it's what's in the standard. The standard mentions that we need to consider the power and influence. Okay, so for example, all risks, all environmental risks in our internal operations, we have 100% power. All the environmental risks related with our product, when the product is being used by the customer, we have no control. We can influence, okay? We can influence. That's why they put the instructions when we buy something. With suppliers, okay, in some situations, your company may have power or influence to influence a supplier, to change, to invite a supplier, to improve, but there are situations where you cannot do that, okay? I remember more than 30 years ago, I was working with a company. We were manufacturing a product for the business to business. We wanted to make some requests to the supplier. Okay, it was a big company, a big German company, and the owner of the company said to us, "Okay, we cannot do that because there are all over the world this kind of suppliers, there are only 4. Okay, if we make some kind of requirements, they will say buy to another one. We don't care, buy to another one. And so, okay, we need to take that in consideration. So how do we assess a company who depends on a single supplier? So my approach would be to try the card of collaboration. Okay, what's in it for them? How can I invite them, because they are the only supplier, because they have the power to say no, we don't want to do that, because if you don't like, okay, find another supplier. Okay, and sometimes no, we don't do that. Or for example, when I work in quality with some organizations, so we do the evaluation of suppliers, or we start implementing the system, we make the evaluation of suppliers, and realize that there is a supplier with very good prices, for example, but quality is not so good. Okay, what sometimes we do, we invite them to work with them. Okay, to coach them, not me, but the company that I'm working as a consultant, but to work with them in order to improve their performance, because the customer don't want to lose them because they have a good, nice prices, but wants to improve their performance. And here will be the same, something like asking them to, inviting them to improve, and offering our know-how to do that. Okay, so yeah, let's see here. More questions. Let's see if there are more questions. No more questions? Okay. All right. So no more questions. Let's okay, I think I've covered all your. Oh, we have here one more question. Okay. No, it's saying no more. Okay. All right. So as I mentioned, this 1-hour webinar was intended to give an overview of environmental risks in a supply chain, what it is, why it's important, and how to do it. You can ask me anything about ISO 14001 directly by email. You can also download this presentation deck from our website, or take a look at video tutorials and documentation templates. We'll send you the email with all the necessary links. Finally, right after this webinar, you'll see a short survey. So I would kindly ask to you to spend a minute to fill it in. The recording of this presentation will be available in a few hours. You will receive a link to the recording. That will be all. Thank you for your participation, and I hope